Hello, welcome to the fourth part of our research methods course. Our fourth topic is about other research designs. We broke research design into three parts. The first part was the quantitative research design. Then the second part was the qualitative research design. But because the qualitative research design was also broad, we broken part of it and then added other research designs together. So welcome to this part of the research design class. I'm happy to have you there. We are completing what we had not completed last week, and that's why we are starting with number 6, which is the ethnographic studies design. This design are qualitative in nature, and the procedures utilized, we use qualitative procedures to describe and analyze and interpret culture's characteristics. Ethnography as a study design was developed in the 19th century and later the late 19th century and early 20th centuries, and it is used by mainly anthropologists to explore primitive cultures different from their own, and it definitely originated from anthropology. So we use ethnographic studies mainly when you're studying cultures of people other than your own. It is used when a researcher wants to study a group of people to gain a large understanding of their lives or specific aspects of their lives. The primary data collection method is through observation over an extended period of time. It would also be appropriate to interview others who have studied the same cultures. There is a study that became controversial. One white woman from the West wanted to study one of our musicians, one of our artists in Uganda, so that he can write a PhD dissertation on the lifestyle of artists in Uganda. So there was no better way for her, according to her, other than to marry this artist and study his lifestyle as a wife. He stayed with the man for 3 or 4 years as she was doing her studies. By the end of her studies, she was able to produce a dissertation of about 300 and 400 pages about the lifestyle of an artist. It was controversial because normally you don't hide. If the man knew that she had an intention of studying him, I think the story would have been different. So the controversy is about the ethics. How do you study somebody? How do you study somebody without information, without informed consent? So that was in the problem. So ethnography is about studying people in their original setting, cultural setting. So, I mean, even in business, you can study that because these days culture is very, very important in business settings. Culture is an important factor in success of business. So if you want to study particular cultures and how it influences business, you can actually use ethnography to study people in their cultures and how they respond to businesses. You can discuss the details later. The other type of research designs are exploratory research design. An exploratory research design is conducted about a research problem when there are few or no earlier studies to refer to. The focus is on gaining insights and familiarity for later investigation or undertaken when problems are in preliminary stages of investigation. The goals of exploratory research are intended to produce the following insights. Exploratory. As the name suggests, you don't have a lot of information, you don't have a lot of background, you don't have a lot of data, you don't have a lot of prior studies. So you are exploring exploratory design. So you do that in order to familiarize with the basic details, with the settings and concerns, so that you are well-grounded, you have a well-grounded picture of the station being developed, so that you can also generate new ideas and assumptions, develop tentative theories and hypotheses. That's the purpose of exploratory study design. So, continuation. Exploratory study design is a determination about whether the study is feasible in the future. You do that exploration so that you don't go full scale to study something that is not studiable. So you do that to explore whether you can go in details. So, of course, if you, for example, you wanted to do a PhD, which will take you 3 to 4 years, and you need to produce at least 200 pages, you cannot start on a topic that will dry you up, where you'll dry up in about 3 to 5 pages. So you sometimes do an exploratory study in order to see its potential for development. So the insights from this are also to get refined for a more systematic investigation and for formulation of new research questions. It also helps in the direction for future research and techniques development. What does exploratory study tell us? The design is useful for gaining background information on a particular topic. It is flexible and can address research questions of all types. You can answer the question what, you can answer the question why, you can answer the question how at that exploratory stage. It is often used to generate formal hypotheses and to develop more precise research problems. It helps to establish research priorities. So that's the beauty of exploratory research design. It is important for people who are venturing into a new area to first do exploratory research. Otherwise, it's like groping in the dark. You do not know what is outside. You're just going there like that. If you say, I'm going to do my master's studies on a subject that you know nothing about, there's nobody has written anything about, you are likely to get into trouble. So you better do some exploratory research before you get into details. Secondly, we now move to longitudinal design. Longitudinal follows the same sample. This kind of study design follows the same sample over time and makes repeated observations. Example, the same group of people is interviewed at regular intervals to enable the researcher to track the changes over time and to relate them to variables that might explain why the changes occur. Longitudinal. You study a group of people today, the same group of people today, after you've done all the preparations, the sampling and so on, you study them, collect data on them today or this week. Then you wait for 5 weeks to go, or even 5 months to go. Then you go back and collect data from the same group of people, and then go back again after 5 months. The time period can vary depending on the nature of your study. And then keep collecting data. But over time, you can see the trend That's why longitudinal is very, very important. You're able to see the trend. You study the same group of people over time and collect data and compare the changes that have happened over time. So it describes the patterns of change and helps establish the direction and magnitude of causal relationships. The measures are taken on each variable over 2 or more distinct time periods. If you don't have a lot of time and a lot of resources, you can take 2 points. You can take a study at point A, then you say, let me wait for 6 months and take the same data, collect the same data using similar instrument or same instruments from the same group of people 6 months later. You will see how things have changed over time. Even opinions change. That's why somebody might be a yellow today, and then after 6 months, he is a red, he is something else. For those of us in Uganda, you know what yellow is and what red is. So opinions can change over 6 months period. That's why a longitudinal study can help to capture changes that occur over time. It also allows the researcher to measure change in variables over time, and it is typical of observation study, sometimes referred to as a panel study. Longitudinal data allow the analysis of duration of a particular phenomena. So if you want to, I sympathize with students of masters, because you have a very short time. You cannot have the privilege to do a longitudinal study unless you are using secondary data. If you're using secondary data, then you can say you can do that. But sometimes that one is called panel data. Data that has been collected before, but at different time intervals. That's how people are able to trace population growth. That's how people are able to trace economic growth in business enterprises. They collect data over different periods of time, and then they can be able to see the growth. You can be able to compute the growth rate over time. That's longitudinal data. So further details about longitudinal data. It enables survey researchers to get close to the kind of causal relations, usually attained with experiments. We talked about experimental design, where you have a sample and you divide them into 2 equal groups. And then one group is called the experimental group. The other group is called the control group. Then you manipulate, you manipulate the independent variable in one group and you leave the other one untouched. And after some time, you come and investigate. The people who received the treatment, whether they received money or received medicine, whatever, what happens to them after a period of time compared to those who never received anything. Now, longitudinal studies is able to capture that as well. So the results may be similar. So if you are not able to do experimental design, you can do then the longitudinal design. You might come out with similar answers. The design permits the measurement of differences or change in variable from one period to another. Longitudinal studies facilitate the prediction of future outcomes based upon earlier factors. You can be able to predict. If you have studied a phenomenon over 3 points along the way, you can actually, after some point, you can say, I expect this trend to be going in this direction. So you can predict. After you have studied 2 points or 3 points, you can predict. So the third type of design today is sequential design. Sequential is carried out in a deliberate, staged approach in a serial manner. One stage is completed, followed by another, then another, and so on, with the aim that each stage will build upon the previous one until enough data is gathered over time to test the hypothesis. The sample size is not predetermined at this point, but you just continue to collect data sequentially, stage by stage, and you expect them to be building on top of each other. That data collection can build on each other until you come out with some trend, how the data is coming out. After each sample is analyzed, the researcher can accept the null hypothesis or accept the alternative hypothesis, or select another pool of subjects and conduct the study once again. After doing the serial data collection, you can be able to say, okay, now I can accept the null hypothesis, or I can accept the alternative hypothesis, or you can reject the null hypothesis, or reject the alternative hypothesis. Okay, this means the researcher can obtain a limited number of subjects before finally making a decision whether to accept the null hypothesis or the alternative hypothesis. Using quantitative framework as sequential design generally utilizes sampling techniques, gather data, and apply statistical methods to analyze. While when you use qualitative framework, sequential studies utilize samples of individuals or groups or cohorts and use qualitative methods such as interviews or observation to gather data from each sample. We are through with sequential design, and as the name suggests, you go sequentially. The purpose is there any developments that are coming out in these sequences? Can you be able to see the development in the sequence? When there is some development, then you can begin to say, aha, this thing is going in this direction. This thing is going in the other direction. So you can be able now to formulate hypotheses that when something is like this, over time, you can be able to see the outcome coming out like this. You can be able now to say, I can hypothesize that the more you give a loan credit to the small scale businesses, the more they fail, something like that. So that is a sequential or serial design. So the other design that students use a lot, researchers use a lot, is a cross-sectional research design. This cross-sectional design can only measure differences between or from among a variety of people or subjects. They cannot measure change because it is cross-sectional. It is a study at one point in time. So you cannot claim that there is a change unless you undertook a baseline study. If you undertook a baseline study, then your cross-sectional design can give you a direction. If a baseline study was done in January and you collected data from the same population, then you can come in July and do a cross-sectional study, collect data from the same group of people, and then you'll be comparing what you find with the baseline data. There you can be able to show direction. But otherwise, cross-sectional design measures only phenomena at a point in time. So the researchers using cross-sectional design can only employ a passive approach to making causal inferences. You cannot be very sure. You can only say it is likely, it looks likely. You cannot make concrete conclusion. What does cross-sectional design tell us? It provides us with a snapshot of the outcome and the characteristics associated with it at a specific point in time. It's like a camera. You take a shot, a camera shot. I like the people who take a camera shot from the sky. And if you want to see the development of Kampala, if you had an aerial camera shot of Kampala city in 1960, and then you had a camera shot from the sky of Kampala in 1970, and then 1980, and 1990, and 2000, and 2020, you'll be shocked at the differences that you see. But in cross-sectional design, we don't have the privilege to compare 70 and 80 and 90 and 2020. You go out in the field, you enter an organization like maybe Crown Bottlers Limited, and then you collect data from the staff in that place at that time, and then you come and analyze what you see. So you're only able to describe what is there at that time. You have no privilege to compare and contrast with anything, unless you want to compare with other organizations. But that one must be a data that probably has already been collected by somebody else. Unlike the experimental design, where there is an active intervention by the researcher to produce and measure the change, cross-sectional design focus on studying and drawing inferences from existing differences between people or phenomena. The differences that exist at that point in time is what you study. You cannot claim to study differences before or after. So it also entails collecting data and concerning one at one point in time. If you want to compare that with longitudinal studies, longitudinal collects data over an extended period of time. So for cross-sectional studies, groups are identified for the study are purposely selected based on existing differences in the sample rather than seeking random sampling. Finally, cross-sectional studies are capable of using data from a large number of subjects. And unlike observational studies, it is not geographically bound. So cross-sectional studies can collect data from a large number of subjects. A large number of subjects. That's why most people say, I am doing a cross-sectional survey design. I am doing a cross-sectional survey design. And my population is 1,000 business owners in Uganda, 1,000 business owners in Kampala, 1,000 business owners in Central Region. But I'll also sample from that 1,000. I want to sample. I want to pick a representative sample. So I'll use a formula, and then I'll find that out of 1,000, I need 400 to represent the 1,000. So I will study 400 people. Cross-sectional studies, survey design, can help you to study 400 people. But all the other designs, most of the other designs, you cannot use it to study 400 people. You cannot observe 400 people. You cannot do a ethnographic study on 400 people. You cannot do a phenomenological study on 400 people. That would be too complicated. So quantitative methodologies help us to study big numbers, while qualitative methodologies enable us to study smaller numbers. So that brings us to the end of cross-sectional research designs, the various types of research designs. We shall be discussing this further in our groups, in our assignments, in our concept papers, and in our interactions when we come face to face. We shall be discussing this, and we shall be seeing where we can apply these designs given our context, our desires, or whatever we want to do. We want to see which of these would be most suitable for the nature of the study that we want to do. Thank you. Wish you all the best. Bye.